Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast brought to you by racefortheprize.com. How do we prepare for Iowa? You don't have track history to lean on. That's okay. You've got short track package data from 2024. And in this spreadsheet, you can see the Phoenix race, the Richmond race, and the Martinsville race. And the data that we will have in front of you for each race is starting position, their true average running position. I'll explain that in a second. Finishing, fast laps led, their points, and then the laps they run in the top five. So, for example, Denny Hamlin was in the top five for 68% of the race. That was the most at Phoenix. And so there you have that data. If you want this data, go to racefortheprize.com. Actually, you don't even need to go there. Just grab your phone right now, open your Venmo app, PayPal app, Cash app, and send some money my way. No signups, no subscriptions, no automatic renewals, no proof of identification or address. Just Venmo, PayPal, 23 or 49 if you want June and July over to me, and I'll get you this data right now. Help you get ready for Iowa. In this podcast, we're just going to simply talk about the sheet and go over some general drivers that we like. Maybe later in the week, I'll break down the individual Phoenix, Richmond, and Martinsville races, but those podcasts are pretty much already up on my website. We may go over it again, but again, if you just go to my YouTube channel, you can find it. So what we're looking at first, PRI, Phoenix, Richmond, Iowa, these are the tests. Who tested? Is there a correlation between testing and results? So really, we only have two to lean on at the moment, Phoenix and Richmond. We look at Phoenix, and well, before we explain that and talk about it, let's talk about all the columns. So those are testers. Here we have optimal lineup appearances. So for example, Martin Truex Jr. was in the optimal lineup at Phoenix, scored 74 fantasy points. The next three columns, PRM again with the money sign. These are our value picks. These are drivers that were priced under $7,000 in that race that scored scored in the top 20 in DFS. Then this is all self-explanatory. Now, as far as true average running position, which is how I have it sorted right now, what I've done is I've gone through all the laps, was it 1,200-ish, almost laps, and then calculated their average. Now, as opposed to NASCAR, which if a driver wrecks out halfway through the race and then is scored in 35th place for the next 200 laps, which then suppresses their average running position, I simply only calculate the laps on the track. It's not perfect because penalties, etc., but it gives you a better idea of the actual running speed of the car. And when we sort by that, Denny Hamlin in the short track package has been the best driver, averaging a running position true of 6th place. And then all the other data points I've already explained. So let's talk about testing. Is there a correlation? It's too long, didn't read. It's inconclusive because we really only have two tests. We do only have two tests. And one test really probably shouldn't have existed. But we do have Christopher Bell testing at Phoenix and scoring 94 fantasy points. It seems to have helped him. Now, remember the Phoenix test was much closer to the actual Phoenix race. And the Phoenix test was the last test and the closest to the actual package. So that does make some sense. And so from that conclusion, we could say that the Iowa testers like Brad Keselowski, Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell could have a step up on the field. Meaning, if you go back to last week and we look at Sonoma, Martin Truex Jr., although they tested and didn't show up in practice, when it came time to race, they were fine. So draw your own conclusions about that. Ross Chastain, regardless of the incident on the last lap, still is pretty racy, and he also tested. Josh Berry, maybe testing made him a little too racy. The bowling ball, Josh Berry. Now, as for Richmond, to explain this, the original Richmond test was not supposed to occur. It was supposed to be at New Hampshire, but because of weather, they had it at Richmond. So, the test really wasn't supposed to happen there. And after the test, like, oh yeah, everything went fine. This is 6 months later. Yeah, that Richmond test didn't work. And so, if it didn't work and they changed the package and it wasn't really supposed to be there, anything that the drivers probably learned at Richmond was really just a waste of time. And you could see that no one at Richmond really was able to take over that practice session, which happened, testing session, should have been a long time ago, and probably a different version of the package. Didn't really translate into optimal. So again, it's inconclusive whether testing matters, but I would argue that since the Iowa test has been in such recent times and they've learned a lot, that I would think that Larson Keselowski and Bell have a bit of an advantage on the field. All right, so where do we go from here? Let's just simply talk about the teams that are scoring points, get an idea of, all right, who are the early favorites to lead a lot of laps, run a lot of fast laps, just a bit of a refresher here. And then maybe look at some possible value picks real quickly, and then maybe a longer podcast later in the week. The thing that jumps out immediately is JGR Toyota. Number 2, Chase Elliott, which might surprise some people, but he is on average starting in the front. He is running up front. He's just not leading a lot of laps and scoring a lot of fantasy points. So he hasn't quite been on our radar, but he is knocking on the door. And he has been right there. On average, 50% of his laps in the top 5, 76% in the top 10, which is comparable to Denny Hamlin. He's right there. Just needs a little bit more. But again, a Hendrick car, another Hendrick car, and Kyle Larson, who is leading laps, running fast laps. Martin Truex Jr., 2 big scores. Right there with the JGR Toyota, another Hendrick. Then you've even got Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick with JGR Ally Toyotas. Logano's a bit of the anomaly here. He could actually be a little bit higher, though. Phoenix, they just kind of missed it. And remember, he got stuck in traffic and just had a bad day. Then that Richmond night race where he's typically been good, he turned it on. A good Martinsville. Then we got another Hendrick car in 9th place with Alex Bowman. Chastain. No real surprises. Gibbs and Bell are kind of down on our board, but again, this is a quick jump into, and it's hard to give you all of the contextual evidence. But you'll remember in those races, Gibbs and Bell had issues, speeding penalties, getting through traffic, starting in the back, etc. So you got to be careful when we're averaging these things out and making these quick analysis that we make sure you factor that in. It's probably good for a later podcast or reviewing previous podcasts. So they're fine just because they're not high on the scoreboard. You got to be careful, right? To jump to conclusions like, oh, well, there's problems there. No. Clean race, Bell and Gibbs are definitely right up there with the rest of the JGR Toyotas. Briscoe is kind of a bit of a surprise, but we aren't too surprised, really, because we know that the SHR Fords have been good in the short track packages over the past several seasons. And Briscoe, since they've jumped to the, I guess I got to call it the Gen 7 car now, has been pretty strong. Good day at Phoenix. Good day at Phoenix. Had a bad day at Richmond, but for him to have a bad day and still finish 18th, he remarked like, hey, we didn't have the car. It's probably the worst car we've had, worst day we've had. We still finished 18th. We'll take it. So that's pretty good. And then he comes back the next week at Martinsville. Very strong. Now we're just getting to the RFK Fords, which you look at their data, they're actually finishing quite better than where they're running. And if you look at the post-race interviews and you look at the way that these races unfolded at the end, they were very lucky, very fortunate. If we're looking at speed-wise, they're really not in the same realm as Hendrick. They're not in the same atmosphere as the JGR Toyotas. They're not in the same ballpark. Now, after the testing session, they could take a step forward. Maybe they've learned things recently. But where it stands, looking at Phoenix, Richmond, and Martinsville, they are not there. Blaney has not been there. Gregson's, I guess, your next guy stepping up, putting together some competitive laps. Had a pretty good start, worth considering. Someone I would want to do a little more research in. One of the things I'm really impressed by are the front row motorsports cars. When we look at the short track package, here's Todd Gilliland, top 20 driver, which really isn't a surprise. We should consider Gilliland a top 20 driver. Average running position of 16th. He's finishing 17th in the 3 races. 29th to 17th at Phoenix. Starts up front, falls back at Richmond, but his running position was 17th. Then you go to Martinsville, 16th to 13th, pretty solid. And you look at his teammate, who has been kind of a monster in fantasy, mainly because he's not starting where he should. But he's been a good value play in all 3 races. He was optimal at Martinsville. Phoenix, he starts 25th, finishes 18th. Not the greatest day, but in terms of fantasy, we will take that. Richmond, he starts too close to the front, but has a really good race, running 13th, finishes 8th. Martinsville starts in the back, gets to 26th. Not the best day, but he scores fantasy points. 10 fast laps. Where do those come from? Pretty fortunate, but overall, I'd say not bad for front row motorsports. Hosts are up here. Another thing that jumps out, Kyle Busch, 23rd on the board, below Priest and Suarez. And you look at the average running position of 20th, you go look at his teammate, 36th for Austin Dillon, below Josh Williams, below Derek Kraus, below Daniel Hemrick. Oh my goodness. RCR, heading into Iowa, where they didn't test, would be a little bit of a concern to me. I would be very reluctant to roster them. Now, things could change. You're definitely going to want to look at the practice data. This will be the week of all weeks. Look at that practice lap-by-lap data, which you can get at racefortheprize.com, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. You know it. Got to pay for the 3Ds, daycare, diapers, and Mickey D's. It is Inside Out 2 right now for the Happy Meals. We had just gone through Marvel and kept getting the same stupid drone. I guess the new Captain America, which used to be the Falcon dude, but I guess now he's just Captain America. I don't understand how that is. He was Falcon. You don't change your name. Anyway, he has like a drone, and we keep getting the drone. How disappointing is that when your son opens a Happy Meal? Where are you from? Meal. So excited, and he gets the same thing. So disappointed that he doesn't even take the toy out of the plastic wrapper, you know? That's that feeling. Now, with Inside Out 2, we got fear and we got sadness. That's great. At least we got two separate toys, but they had to be the most disappointing toys, too. Oh, and then the rest of these guys, I don't think there's too many surprises. One of the things that is kind of shocking to me is to see Corey LaJoie as far down on the board as he is in average rank position. That's got to be some sort of calculation error. There's no way. I mean, 43 doesn't make any sense. Oh, I think I know what that is. I know what number is throwing that off. There's some outlier number in one of the 1,200 cells. Occasionally, NASCAR will throw in some crazy goof number if your guy finishes really poorly. So, like, instead of being in 35th place, the calculation will be 679. And I guarantee I'll find out where that is. Where is it at? Well, it's in one of them. There it is. So I'll have to go through and fix that. But overall, LaJoie is not running well. The numbers that aren't flubbed are his finishing position. But it does at least alert us to us. He had a really bad race one day. Anyway, numbers are not good for those guys. So early value that you'd look at, maybe Priest. I like Todd Gillen. I like Michael McDowell. Cindric's been really disappointing, although his pit crew can be pretty good. I like Stenhouse more in the intermediate track package. We're not seeing anything from Nemechek. Justin Haley, possibly, but I think I like him more in the intermediate track package. But overall, I mean, you look at Hosmer, very solid 2022-20. I believe he had a strong Phoenix race last year with his part-time team. If I remember off the top of my head, may not have got the finish. I think he got top 20 last year. Part-time running for Legacy. Anybody else value-wise? Eric Jones has been getting cheap. Solid performances. Average rank is 17th. Seems to always get more out of his car. And even in his bad race at Phoenix, he was running well at Phoenix. And if you remember, he's got an average rank position 16th. He had that issue on a restart at the end, got wrecked by, I believe it was Briscoe. So if Jones comes in cheap, we definitely like that play as well. All right, I think that does it for this short, simple, sweet podcast. Probably throw some stuff at you later this week. If you want to look at this data, racefortheprize.com. Very blessed to have you guys joining me. As always, subscribe, share, like, and there goes the treadmill. So I am done. Love you guys. Trip to life, fantastic.